The sun had barely risen above the horizon when Air Force One lifted off from Joint Base Andrews, its engines humming with the familiar confidence of thousands of successful missions. Inside the aircraft, the atmosphere was calm and routine. Staff members typed away on laptops, aides reviewed schedules, and security personnel stood at their designated posts. It seemed like just another official flight. Former President Donald Trump sat in the executive cabin, reviewing notes for a private event scheduled later that day. Although he had traveled on this aircraft countless times, every flight carried its own rhythm and energy. Today felt unusually still, almost too quiet. A few minutes after the jet reached cruising altitude, Trump called over a senior flight attendant and requested to speak with the cockpit crew. It was uncommon for any passenger, even a former president, to initiate direct communication so early in a flight, but his tone hinted that something important was on his mind. The attendant quickly relayed the message to the cockpit. Inside the cockpit, Captain Harris, well known among the crew for his calm demeanor and personal political views that leaned openly liberal, received the message with a raised eyebrow. He wasn't expecting any mid-flight conversations, especially not this soon. Still, professionalism was his priority. He instructed the co-pilot to maintain heading while he opened the secure communication channel. Trump's voice came through clearly. He explained that he wanted to make an unscheduled stop at a different city due to an urgent matter that had just come to his attention. He insisted that the situation required an immediate change of course and that Air Force One had the flexibility to handle such adjustments. Captain Harris listened carefully, weighing the request with measured caution. Air Force One was equipped to handle sudden alterations, but changes were never simple. They required coordination with ground security, air traffic control, and military communication channels. Any deviation needed solid justification and approval from multiple authorities. Despite understanding the seriousness in Trump's tone, Captain Harris felt obligated to follow established protocol. He calmly explained that they needed formal clearance before altering their route. He also noted that the alternate landing location had not been vetted by security teams, making a sudden diversion risky and potentially disruptive for everyone involved. There was a brief silence as Trump processed the response. The crew members in nearby sections felt the tension in the air, though no one dared to interrupt. Trump eventually replied that the matter was urgent enough to override standard procedures. He pressed again for an immediate course change. The captain remained professional but firm. He emphasized that without full authorization from command and security teams, he could not execute the request. His refusal was not personal, it was part of the strict framework that safeguarded every flight. The response caught several nearby staff members off guard. They were accustomed to quick adjustments whenever Trump traveled, and hearing a pilot decline a direct request at 30,000 feet was almost unheard of. The atmosphere in the cabin shifted as whispers spread among aides and security personnel trying to understand what had just happened. The moment was unexpected. It wasn't confrontational yet carried a gravity that made everyone on board realize something unusual was unfolding. And this was only the beginning. The silence after Captain Harris's refusal lingered in the cabin. Aides and security officers exchanged uneasy glances, each wondering how far the situation might escalate. Trump, known for his assertiveness and persuasive communication, didn't back down easily. He stood, moving closer to the partition that separated the executive cabin from the cockpit, determined to make his case directly. Captain Harris, seated at the controls with the co-pilot beside him, noticed the movement on the video monitor but kept his hands steady on the yoke. He had trained for moments like this countless times, unexpected pressure from high-profile passengers, and his priority remained the safety of everyone on board. Through the secure intercom, Trump addressed him directly, his voice firm but controlled. "Captain Harris, I understand protocol, but the matter I'm dealing with cannot wait. Lives, reputations, and schedules are at stake. I need you to adjust our route immediately." The captain exhaled slowly. "Sir," he replied calmly, "I understand the urgency of your request, but Air Force One operates under strict flight regulations. Any mid-flight diversion requires confirmation from the Department of Defense, the Federal Aviation Administration, and our security coordination team. Without that, I cannot compromise the safety of the flight or its passengers." Trump's aides began subtly signaling to him, attempting to remind him that pushing too hard in this situation might backfire. Some murmured among themselves, noting how unusual it was to see a pilot openly decline a request from someone of his stature. The tension in the cabin was palpable. Every crew member understood that this moment could set a precedent for interactions between passengers and flight staff. Meanwhile, Captain Harris carefully analyzed the situation. He had a deep respect for the office of the former president, but his training as a pilot and officer demanded adherence to rules above all else. Deviating without authorization could create complications in security protocols, emergency planning, and air traffic control, risks too significant to ignore. The co-pilot, sensing the stress in the cockpit, quietly monitored communication channels, ready to relay any updates or receive orders from command if they arrived. The captain's firm yet measured tone emphasized that this was not personal, it was professional. Back in the executive cabin, Trump paced quietly, weighing his next move. He appreciated the pilot's dedication, but his temperament and sense of urgency made compromise difficult. He instructed his aides to contact the Department of Defense directly for faster authorization, hoping to bypass some of the procedural delays that Captain Harris had cited. Even as these communications began, the crew remained vigilant. Every minute in the air had to be monitored carefully, and the decision to divert or continue on the planned route required precise timing. Captain Harris continued flying steadily, demonstrating the calm composure that had earned him the trust of his colleagues over the years. By the time official confirmation from higher authorities began filtering through, the situation had already tested the patience, professionalism, and communication skills of everyone aboard. The crew had faced unusual pressure, and the former president had confronted boundaries he rarely encountered. What started as a routine flight had now become a high-stakes test of protocol, authority, and judgment at 30,000 feet, and yet, despite the growing tension, no one acted impulsively. The unfolding drama was contained, measured, and precise, setting the stage for what was about to come next. By mid-morning, Air Force One was cruising steadily at 35,000 feet, but the tension inside the cabin and cockpit was anything but routine. Trump, having requested faster authorization through his aides, still faced delays from the chain of command. Every minute that passed felt like an eternity to him, and his insistence on a mid-flight change became more pronounced. Captain Harris remained seated firmly at the controls, his hands steady on the yoke, his eyes scanning instruments, and ears focused on communication channels. Every alert, every incoming message, required his immediate attention. The co-pilot mirrored his calm, double-checking flight plans, fuel calculations, and alternate landing sites, ensuring nothing was overlooked in the growing standoff. Inside the executive cabin, aides relayed updates from the Department of Defense, though nothing had arrived yet that could authorize the abrupt course change. Trump leaned over the table, reviewing potential alternatives he had outlined before takeoff. Each option, he noted, could save time and achieve objectives that were highly important to him. Yet the crew and the strict protocols limited how quickly these changes could be implemented. Some staff members began speculating quietly about the pilot's political leanings. Captain Harris had never hidden his liberal views, and whispers circulated that this ideological difference was influencing the standoff. However, Harris was focused purely on procedure. Deviating from flight regulations could endanger the aircraft and everyone on board. This was not about politics, it was about safety and protocol. The former president, sensing the growing impatience, decided to address the crew one more time. Through the intercom, he attempted a more persuasive approach, stressing urgency, responsibility, and the importance of acting decisively. "Captain Harris," he said, "I know the rules are important, but sometimes we need to act quickly. This is one of those moments. I'm asking you to help me." Harris responded with his signature calmness, "Sir, I respect your position, and I understand the importance of your request. But until proper authorization is confirmed, I cannot change course. I have a responsibility to every person on this plane and to the chain of command. I assure you, this is for everyone's safety." The exchange drew the attention of everyone on board. Security personnel, aides, and support staff were now fully aware of the unusual nature of the interaction. Conversations were hushed but observant. Cameras, if they had been rolling, would have captured a mix of professionalism, tension, and the human drama of leadership versus procedure, all occurring thousands of feet above the ground. Suddenly, a notification arrived on the captain's console, a preliminary response from command. While it did not yet grant permission to divert, it acknowledged the urgency of the matter. Harris relayed the information to Trump, explaining that the situation required further review before any deviation could occur. The message, though polite, reinforced the pilot's stance: no action without complete authorization. Trump, realizing that even direct appeals were unlikely to sway the pilot, leaned back, temporarily restraining his insistence. He glanced around the cabin, noting the anticipation on everyone's faces. The standoff was far from over, but the situation had reached a tense equilibrium. Above the clouds, Air Force One continued its journey on the original flight path. Below, the world remained unaware of the high-stakes negotiation unfolding silently in the sky. The drama was contained, but both the former president and the crew understood that the resolution, or escalation, would soon define the rest of the flight. Hours into the flight, the tension inside Air Force One had reached its peak. The calm routine of a presidential flight was completely replaced by a quiet but palpable standoff. Trump, frustrated by the delay and the pilot's firm refusal, called for another update from the Department of Defense. His aides scrambled, phones and secure communication devices in hand, trying to accelerate the authorization process. Captain Harris, fully aware of the high stakes, continued to maintain his professionalism. He monitored every system on the aircraft while coordinating with air traffic control and the military command. His commitment to protocol never wavered, even under immense pressure from a former president. Every movement, every decision was precise, calculated, and deliberate. Trump decided to take one last measured approach. He addressed the cockpit once more, this time blending urgency with diplomacy. "Captain Harris, I know you are committed to safety, and I respect that. But consider the broader picture. This adjustment could prevent significant complications on the ground. I'm asking you to exercise judgment." Harris paused, considering the statement. He understood the appeal to judgment, but as a pilot, his judgment was guided by regulations, procedures, and the safety of everyone aboard. Deviating without full clearance could have cascading consequences. Meanwhile, aides continued relaying updates. After tense minutes of silence, a formal response finally arrived from command. The diversion could be authorized, but only after a strict set of protocols and coordination with ground teams at the alternate location. This meant a delay of at least 20 minutes while communications and safety checks were completed. Trump, initially impatient, realized the necessity of waiting. He leaned back, acknowledging that even his influence had limits at 35,000 feet. Captain Harris, maintaining a calm demeanor, relayed the news and began coordinating the required steps for the flight path adjustment. The co-pilot meticulously recalculated fuel margins, approach procedures, and emergency contingencies to ensure the aircraft remained secure during the diversion. The atmosphere in the cabin gradually shifted. The initial shock of a pilot standing firm against a direct request gave way to a quiet appreciation of professionalism. Staff members recognized that this was not defiance, it was responsible leadership at the highest level. Even Trump, known for his decisiveness, appeared to understand the necessity of adhering to protocol. The situation, once teetering on the edge of confrontation, slowly began to stabilize. Everyone aboard realized that extraordinary circumstances required patience, coordination, and respect for established procedures. While the drama was far from ordinary, it underscored a fundamental truth: even the most powerful individuals must sometimes wait for rules and systems to align before action can be taken. As Air Force One adjusted course according to the approved plan, the tension eased, leaving a subdued but reflective cabin. The stage was now set for the final moments of the flight, where leadership, judgment, and patience would culminate in a resolution that balanced authority with safety. As the flight continued on the newly approved route, a calm settled over Air Force One. The tension that had dominated the cabin and cockpit for hours gradually eased. Staff members returned to their duties, quietly reflecting on the unusual mid-flight standoff they had witnessed. The professionalism of Captain Harris and his co-pilot had ensured that, despite the pressure, safety remained uncompromised. Trump, seated in the executive cabin, leaned back and reviewed the unfolding schedule. Though initially frustrated, he seemed to recognize the discipline and responsibility demonstrated by the crew. Even someone accustomed to immediate results could appreciate the importance of procedure when lives and security were at stake. The realization that rules exist for a reason brought a subtle shift in his demeanor, a moment of reflection amid the whirlwind of authority, urgency, and expectation. In the cockpit, Captain Harris and the co-pilot monitored the instruments carefully, ensuring that the new flight path remained stable. The diversion proceeded smoothly, without any complications or disruptions. Communication with the alternate landing location was clear, precise, and coordinated perfectly, a testament to the rigorous training and protocols of the crew. By the time Air Force One began its descent toward the alternate city, the atmosphere was almost serene. Passengers and staff alike appreciated the smooth execution of a potentially chaotic scenario. The combination of leadership, adherence to rules, and cooperative problem-solving had transformed a tense confrontation into a carefully managed operation. When the plane finally touched down safely, the former president stood, acknowledging the crew with a nod of respect. The staff and pilots exchanged subtle smiles, knowing that a delicate balance had been maintained, authority had been exercised, judgment had been respected, and safety had never been compromised. The flight, once marked by tension and uncertainty, concluded with a sense of resolution. The story of the mid-flight request and the pilot's refusal would remain an example of how professionalism, patience, and adherence to protocol can guide decisions even in extraordinary circumstances. Every individual aboard had learned an important lesson. Sometimes, the best action is measured restraint, and the highest authority lies not just in power, but in judgment exercised responsibly. As Air Force One taxied to the terminal, the passengers and crew prepared to disembark, carrying with them the memory of a flight that had tested limits, demonstrated leadership, and ended with calm reflection. The skies above had been turbulent in tension but clear in resolution, leaving a story of respect, responsibility, and professionalism etched into every memory of the journey.